There you
All
go.
right, just leave it right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, just relax. You don't have to sit up.
No?
Just be comfortable. Yeah, it'll pick up. And I just wanted to find out. You remember when we had the hurricane or something back in Brantford, and you and Carol just spent the day without any power or something like that? Carol learned more about my family than I than I ever knew.
Remember that? We had a couple hours
We
without
said,
power?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just been curious because I don't know a lot about the family. Like, um, when did my grandparents, your parents, come over? Like, my grandma.
Well, my mother, your grandma, Katie, came over when she was 10 years old, alone, and went to an aunt. And they didn't have ships like they have now.
Yeah.
And she lived with Aunt Libby. You heard of Aunt Libby, I imagine. I don't think you ever knew her.
No.
She was Carrie Berman's aunt. Aunt Libby and Carrie Berman's father, the brother and sister.
Okay.
And Libby's name was Ribicoff, and Carrie's name was Kabak, and that was my mother's name. Her mother was married to Louis Kabak's brother,
Okay.
Carrie's uncle. I never knew my grandfather, but Louis Kabak, Carrie's father, was a bachelor then, and he was very good to my mother as a child, because when she came and lived with an aunt, she went to some sort of night school, but she also, when she was 13, she was working. Also working, they worked in the sweatshops. But he was very kind to my mother. And he was interested in culture. He used to like music, and he used to like he took her to the parks as a child, and took her to concerts. They used to have open air free concerts, and he also objected to being like a housemaid, that she was too young, and he used to give it to his sister.
Where were they then? Was this in Brooklyn? Or
This was all in Brooklyn. My mother always lived in Brooklyn, and so did they.
Mm.
This was in Brooklyn. My mother married when she was 17, because Uncle Jack was born when she was 18. And my father was 4 years older.
Mm-hmm. When did he come over?
I don't know when he came over, but he was a little older. Because I know when he died at 36, she was 32. So there was a 4-year difference. I know she was 17 because Uncle Jack was born when she was 18. But they were very happy, and they brought her whole family over. One by one, my father's family came or was here. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. There was Uncle Ike, who was Charlie Levine's father. The flyer was my cousin. His father and my father were brothers. There were 3 brothers. Sam was my father. Isaac was his father, and there was another brother, Ellie. And he had 2 sisters, Aunt Fanny and Aunt Sarah. There were 3 boys and 2 girls. And we were very close as children, because everybody lived near each other. And every Sunday, you would go to a different aunt's for dinner. When it was my mother's turn, they all came. And all the children, my Aunt Dana, I think, had 6. My Uncle Ike, Charlie's father, had 3 wives. With the first one, he had 4 children, but she died. With the second one, he had 4. With the third one, 1. He had 9 children. But he too, they all died very young. My Uncle Ellie died in October 12th. Look how I remember, this is in He died in 1917, and I was 1907, not quite 10. I was 10 when my father died. He died in October 12th, Columbus Day. I'll never forget it. My father died April 18, the following year, from pneumonia, which they didn't know. He had the flu. That was brought in from the World War in 19, but they didn't know what it was because he was never sick in his life. He laid down and never got up. And
What kind of business? What is it?
and they were in the junk business.
Your father?
Yes, I remember the yard. We lived upstairs, and the yard was part of the house. And my grandmother lived. By that time, by the time I was a little girl, my grandmother was here. And then my mother brought over her sister and two brothers. She had one sister and two brothers. And they brought them all over because evidently, you know, my father was making a good living. We were the first ones that had a overland automobile that you cranked.
Yeah.
You had a crank.
I saw the picture of everybody in the car.
Yeah, that's on that picture. That was before he died. We were going to the country. So we were, I guess we were supposed to be the rich ones in the family. So was my Uncle Ike. And he went from that to steel. He started Sharon Tube, which, you know, we have stock.
I don't know.
Well, when he started, that stock was gone, and that was but he was with all the steel mill operators in Pittsburgh. His name was Ike Levine then. But he was a terrific, he was a ladies' man, but his first two wives died. He was a ladies' man, very handsome. Well, all three brothers were, well, the whole family was good looking. My two aunts too. And they all became very successful. When my father died, Jack Ribicoff, one of Aunt Libby's sons, who later owned Detroit Steel or something, he became a millionaire. He was a bookkeeper there for my mother. And when Jack was 16, he was 14 when my father died. When he was 16, they shoved him into the business with a partner who was mature because he was 20 and he was married. And they figured a 20-year-old married man wants to make a mark for himself. So, and he was with Al Amsel for 25 years.
Jacqueline.
Until the Depression. And they did well. He had 4 children. Jack wasn't married. Jack didn't marry until all 4 of us were married.
But Jack got started when he was 16?
16.
And they got the business from where? They bought the business?
Oh, it was my father's business.
It was your father's business?
Oh, it was my
from the
father's
scrap to
business.
from the-
And my mother used to go in, not that she knew anything about the business, but they knew that somebody was overseeing. She used to go in because we always had my grandmother there and a Polish maid. You know, they used to come in from Poland, and they always worked for Jewish families, you know. So we always had help. And my father bought a house because that neighborhood, they didn't like the school that we were going to in that neighborhood. It was near the Navy Yard. Flushing Avenue near Bedford was near the Navy Yard. And he decided he wanted a better neighborhood and a better school for us. So he bought the house on Eastern Parkway. They hadn't started the subway then. They started it when we were living there. He bought it in April And my mother didn't want to move in it after he died. But her whole family talked her into it. And one of the cousins that lived on Eastern Parkway, I remember, took us all to register. And where we went before, we were skipped all the time. You know, we were smart kids and we were skipped. This was a different school. When I came in, it was like learning a different language because it was so far advanced. And I had skipped so many classes that I didn't know what they were talking about. They had history, you know, I was in the 4th grade. And that's how your mother and I graduated together. I was 12 and she was 14 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the term, she wasn't promoted, and I was. So I wound up in the same class, not the same class, but the same average class, like the 3A. I went into the 4A,
So the two of you were actually 2.5 years apart.
2.5. She was May 30th and I was October. 2.5, but very close.
Yeah.
She was a very special sister.
So,
So they finally talked my mother into it, and she moved to Eastern Parkway. And it was a fine school. Oh,
which school?
167. And where we went was 157, I remember. But there were all kinds of children, a lot of Italian children at that time. And, but the school we went to was upgraded. They had, you know, better teachers. History, I never had history in the 3A, you know.
Yeah.
But there you had it. And sure, I still have one friend, Rose Mole. Remember that name? Well, he died, but she's in Lakewood. They retired to Lakewood, New Jersey. And I was friends from that class. I was 10 years old, and she became a friend of mine who lived in the neighborhood till this day.
That's wonderful.
So Carrie she was related,
To my mother, first cousin.
first
To
cousin.
me, she was a second cousin, but we were very close because my mother always felt when Carrie lost her mother very young too, and her father was alone for many years, and then married a Swedish woman, and Carrie had an older sister, Sadie, and a brother, Marty.
Not Sadie Gritz?
Sadie Gritz.
Oh, okay.
And she died too suddenly with cerebral hemorrhage while she was in the kitchen. But that's why my mother always felt close to those 3 children, because their father was so good to her. And that when they lost the mother, my mother was the mother, and Sadie got married in our house. My mother taught her to cook. Once my mother joked, she said, "How do you make soup?" My mother said, "Pot of water and put a little washing soda in it." And she was kidding. She thought she meant it. They were very mean to that stepmother. Oh, and I think what they used to do, see, Sadie used to get Carrie started on different things they used to play on her. And Marty wasn't too bright, and Marty was a sickly kid. I think he had eczema or something. And when the mother died, Sadie was sent to one relative. You know, those days you didn't get welfare. Carrie was sent to another uncle, a rabbi in the Bronx, and Marty was sent to us. And my mother was so afraid of him using anything, towels or anything, because he had this eczema, you know. But they were with us till, I guess, Lou got married, you know. And when he married this woman, oh, they made her miserable. And that was the first time we tasted ham. See, they weren't kosher. Her father wasn't either. And we were there one Sunday because they lived near Prospect Park. and Sadie used to play tennis there. And so when we came back, and they didn't serve like we served, you know, they were very conservative. And so they had a whole plate of cold cuts. When we came back from the park, we all sat there, and I don't remember, they must have dropped us off and then picked us up. And then when and we ate. We didn't ask what it was. And when we came home, my mother must have said, "What'd you have?" And Rose said, "We had pale corned beef." Very pale corned beef with ham. We didn't know. Pale corned beef. Look how you remember certain things. She said we had pale corned beef in Uncle Louie's house. And my mother said, "That was ham." Because with my grandmother living with us, we were very careful. She was religious, and we had dishes in one closet from dairy and dishes for meat in another one. You had blue towels for one and red towels for another. And we never sewed on Saturday. We never wrote on Saturday, not while my grandmother was alive. See, my mother wasn't that particular. After my grandmother died, we could have milk in our coffee after we ate. After the dishes were taken, then we could have milk in our coffee. Before that, we couldn't. But it was
I remember Sadie Grits,
Joe Grits.
Joe Grits.
He was the politician that would fix all the tickets until the cops came along. Saul always used to say, you know, Joe would say, "Oh, leave it to me," and all of a sudden he'd get a summons.
What was Joe's job? He worked for the city?
He worked for the city. I don't remember what department he was, but Sadie was with the traffic court. Oh, and we used to have a ball. That's why when my mother made the wedding, they didn't have too many relatives, but my father did, and they were all comfortable. You know, the Davidsons, that was my father's uncle, Davidson, who was like the matriarch of the whole Levine clan. And when we made the wedding in our house, because it was with the staircase, you came into it was very pretty, and she invited all the Levine relatives because she knew that they would get good checks. The couple, they needed it, but they all knew Sadie because she used to fix their tickets. At that time, it was very easy to fix a traffic ticket, and she used to take care of all their tickets. If they got a traffic ticket, got her number and say, so they all knew her, and they all came to the wedding and all gave nice checks. And she lived right around the corner from us, Union Street. And by that time, they built the subway, the IRT subway. Sure, we were there. The kids used to play there. You know, it was dangerous, but we were there when they were building the subway.
I was right near the parade grounds. The Prospect Park was the parade grounds.
No, I mean Eastern Parkway, where we lived.
Yeah.
Oh, Prospect Park was the parade grounds, yeah.
Well, Eastern Parkway.
But Eastern Parkway, we were near Utica Avenue.
So you were further down.
Yeah, further down.
What?
You come sit here, so you're
And the Shafts lived on one side of us. The Shafts lived on the right, facing the Parkway. The Shafts lived on the right, and the Klausners lived on the left. I don't think you remember.
I remember Joel. Joel Klausner lived across the street.
No. That Joel Klausner was a relative. These are just neighbors.
Okay.
Joel Klausner's mother
Rebecca.
was a Davidson. Rebecca
Oh, she was
was a Davidson, so she was related.
Hmm.
She married a Klausner. No, but Klausner's next door. and to the right was the Shafts.
So they're right next door.
Right next house.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know. I
Right,
knew it was close by, but I didn't know.
right next house. And the Shafts at that time had Gerson, Bob, Mully, who was Jack, Milty, Aaron and Milty. 5 boys and 2 girls. Hank and Beatty. And Gershon was going with Ida then, who was a very beautiful girl.
Yeah.
And Beatty was not married then. Bob married a Klausner. He married Florrie Klausner.
Oh, is that right? She was a close one.
She was a Klausner.
Okay.
And then Rhoda, there was a girl, Rhoda, who was Rose's friend, Rose's age, Rhoda Klausner, who was going with Frank Siegel.
I remember that name from my dad's baseball.
Right. Oh,
Frankie Siegel. From the Albany Heights.
Yeah, Frankie Siegel. Right. Rhoda married Frank, and Marty and I used to go out with Pee Wee. He was Herman's Klausner. He was our age, because there's only 15 months difference between Marty and me, so we had a lot of the same friends. The houses we were in were 2-family, so we had 2 floors, and then there was a tenant that had 2 floors.
Is that right?
The Shafts had Manny Rosenfeld and Rosenblum. Yeah, because he was in our crowd. And then we got a band together. I played the piano. My brother Marty played the clarinet, awful. And Pee Wee Klausner played the saxophone. And Manny Rosenblatt, that's the name, Rosenblatt played something else on it. And his father was not a shamus, a cantor. So we used to love the holiday times. They used to practice, and you could hear these songs, you know. But all in the neighborhood.
Yeah. So
But
how
we
long?
had wonderful times. We really had nice times.
So where did my dad's parents? When did they come over here?
I don't know when they came over. Rose Schaff and Louis Schaff. They were a very strange couple. When we knew them, he really wasn't doing anything then. Whether he had property or what, I don't know where the income came from. But I know his mother used to love, in the country, she liked to play cards. And she used to go away for the whole summer. And he used to take care of the kids, or the kids would come with bags from the delicatessen or something. Aaron.
Really?
They really, she used to like the movies. During the war, I don't know, or after the war, when they were selling things, Jack was able to buy benches, you know, sturdy benches from the army. So every house had a bench, you know. So when you used to sit outside, Rose Schaff used to come alone, not with her husband, and she used to knock on the door to my mother if she wasn't sitting outside and say, they never called each other by the first names. She was Mrs. Levine and Mrs. Schaff. Even when they got married, she used to say, come to the movies, come on to the movies. She liked the movies. And we had one walking distance. And so once my mother went, and she said she wasn't there for 10 minutes when her friend fell asleep, Rose Schaff. Then she went a second time, and then, so she says she goes there because she sleeps well there. The minute she got into the movies, after 5 or 10 minutes, she says, I'm not going to the movies with you anymore. You go there to sleep. She said, yes, I enjoy it. So she never went to the movies, but they were always very formal. She was Mrs. Levine and she was Mrs. Schaff. Isn't that funny? Even at the wedding.
So then my mother became Rose Shaft, same name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in Jewish, that's a bad omen. They always said something about that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
But we really enjoyed when we were growing up.
Aaron came to live with you at some point.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How did
Well,
that
he
come about?
started to. My sister was going out with a fellow George Pfeffer, 2 or 3 houses down, also on the same block. Very good-looking guy, very good-looking guy, and she was very young. And he used to come around and hang around, and it wasn't like today. You know, you didn't go to a movie. You went to somebody's house, and you picked up the rug, and we had to play a piano, you know, and you danced or you sang, or they sat around the piano, you know, with our band. That was awful. It was awful. And then we got to play a piano, you know, so not electric, but you used to have to pedal with your legs. And that's what we used to have, you know, you always in groups. You went to parties, you went in groups. You never dated anybody for a long time. But then I think George's family put their foot down. He was young, you know, and they broke it off. And that's when Aaron was always George's friend, but he wouldn't. That's when he started. And then we used to go to the baseball games. We used to carry our own benches to the lot to root for them. And they had a wonderful ball team, the Albany Heights.
Yeah.
And we used to go down Empire Boulevard, you know, there were a bad bunch of kids then. I don't know, what did we call them? I don't know. We used to have a name for them. Not nice children. But we used to go down in the whole gang, so we weren't afraid. But plenty of fights when the ball games, you know, when it wasn't called right, you know.
Yeah.
But we were right there rooting for them. The girls and the boys, the whole Eastern Parkway ground, you know.
My dad said one time you go sledding in the winter. And
Oh,
he
in the
said-
winter we used to go ice skating. We had a rink at Kingston Avenue. We used to walk,
He said he'd go sledding down the hill.
going
Then
sledding
he had to
down the
fight
hill.
his way back up the hill or something. 'Cause they were
That's
living
right.
Down the hill. Something
Yeah,
like
from Eastern Parkway to Empire Boulevard was downhill. I can't remember what we used to call it. But those were good times. And then he started, and then he started in Boys High, and then he quit, and he started to work because he wanted money to take his girl out. And that's how I was initiated to Chinese food. They went to a movie or something, and there was a good Chinese restaurant on Fulton Street, Brooklyn, downtown. And that was the first time I had it with Rose and Aaron. They said,
And how old were you then?
you gotta taste it. Well, Rose and Aaron were the same age. She was May, and then he was September. October,
December.
November, September. September. She was a few months older. But he wanted to work because he used to come in the house with a box of candy or a bouquet of flowers. Because my mother wasn't too impressed because he wasn't good looking, didn't have an education. You know, what are you tying yourself down to? But my sister didn't listen. And when my mother was very good in real estate. She saw the neighborhood changing, and she decided to sell the house. I was still going to high school, and Rose was going to business school. She went to Heffley, and I went to Erasmus, and I had to go with trolley cars.
Yeah.
2 trolley cars, the Reed Avenue, and I used to change to church.
Yeah, because that wasn't too close. Erasmus wasn't too close.
No, I had a good ride. And we moved to President Street just for a little while. She didn't buy a house, she rented, but she sold it because I guess she got a good price. The sheriff didn't sell yet. And that was when Aaron was working, and he was about 17 then. And he moved right in. He didn't have a car. Couldn't travel because from President Street, we only stayed there till I graduated. And then my mother bought a house in Flatbush, which was the nice neighborhood now. Bedford, and still nice.
That was 3340.
They keep. The last time I spoke to Rebecca for your house, the last time, and that wasn't the last sale, they got $450,000, and then it went up. It got to be a very religious neighborhood there.
Yeah.
A lot of Orthodox people moved in that ran the schools, that ran the... But we moved there, and he moved right in, and we had 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. The boys had 2 double beds. Marty and Milton and Jack and Aaron, they 2 and 2 slept in each bed. 2 people slept in each bed. And in the other bedroom, my mother slept in one bed, and Rose and I slept in another bed, also double beds. And the third room was a small bedroom. My grandmother was there. But when my grandmother died, then the girls slept there, the maid. But when the Depression came, we had to get rid of the maid. So then my mother had a separate room, and Rose and I had the bedroom. But that's it, with 1 bathroom. And we was 4, 3, 7, 8 people, and then 7. And we got along with 1 bathroom.
Yeah.
And we managed.
And how come my
Never
dad...
had any arguments or fights or anything.
Well, my dad just moved in. I mean, did he
His
suggest
folks,
it?
huh?
Did he suggest it, or my mother suggested, or how'd that work?
No,
out?
my sister wanted him to be there because of the traveling. He couldn't travel. He didn't have a car, and he was very close to the boys and to me, to the family. So, and he was working. He was working then for J.S. Becker, a very fine dress house. Used to bring me things that were, a little nick or a little this. Used to bring Rose things, beautiful. Very good clothes. They lived on Eastern Parkway. The ones that he works for. J.S. Becker. They were a very rich family. They had a Cunningham and another car. I forget the name. A yellow Cunningham. I'll never forget it. And they had... And that's who he works for.
So he was 17 when he moved in with your family.
He wasn't quite 18, almost 18. But then and then they weren't married till they were married in 28. So Rose was
22.
22. Yeah, they were both the same age.
And did he stay living with you until they got married?
Oh yes, till they got married. Oh, till they got married. And then when they got married, they took an apartment on Avenue K, which was maybe 10 blocks away from us, in an apartment. The first one was off Avenue M and 17th Street, maybe 3 blocks away. And at that time, my mother furnished, and we had a gorgeous wedding at the Park Manor, which was very brand new, and everything was, and she had a gorgeous trousseau. In those days you bought Now they don't do crazy to buy dresses and things. Oh, but she had a beautiful trousseau and beautiful wedding. The first apartment was off Avenue M, 17th Street or 17th Street. And they had a one-bedroom apartment. And he was working, and she was working for Jack.
Okay. So she worked at JL too.
She worked, yeah, when it was Republic. It was Republic Pipe and Iron.
Oh, when did it become JL?
And during the Depression,
Hmm.
the partner, well, you weren't getting paid because we had a lot of notes from contractors. You know, we sold to plumbers, contractors, and builders. And if they didn't get paid, you couldn't get paid.
And if you couldn't get paid, you couldn't pay anybody.
You couldn't pay anybody. But the only thing is, we had a good reputation before, and a lot of manufacturers said, take whatever you need, and you pay us when you can. And that's how, but the partner got the jump on Jack. That was a terrible thing to do after all those years. They were like brothers, never fought, and he ran out. By that time, he had 4 kids, and Jack and I and Milton weren't married. And we even had a branch in Queens Village that Marty ran. And Marty was going with Beulah then. And when he came and he said, what should I do? We had to give up the branch. There wasn't enough business there. He said, Mr. Brandt, Beulah's father, offered me a job. I think it was $25 a week. I don't know what to do. And I said, take it. At least you'll know. And Marty was still living at home. And he did. He took it. And the partner went and rented a place 2 or 3 blocks from where we were, and went to all the customers and said, look, I'm a married man and I have 4 children to feed, and Jack and his brother and sister are not, I wasn't in it then. They're not married, and I need the business. It wasn't a nice thing to do, but unfortunately he didn't last. He didn't last even for 2 years, and he wound up working for a relative of ours in the pipe business. That's where he remained. We started, that was 32, 30, where the banks were closed. And I came in 30. Rose was married in 28. And when she became pregnant, Jack started after me, wants me to come. And I always had good jobs. And in New York, nice offices, and this was a dumpy office. And I don't want to go there, I used to go by train. And I have to tell you a very funny story that nobody knows, except my family who's gone. I said, I don't want to work in that office. And Rose used to come with Jack. She didn't drive then. So he said, I'll get your car. And that did. He bribed me. He said, you can come at 9 o'clock and you go home at 5. She used to go early in the morning then and have to wait for him at night. Whether she wanted to or not, she had to wait because it was in Flatbush, because when the Depression came, Aaron was not like a son-in-law. He was a good son, and he appreciated it, and my mother did too. She realized the minute the Depression came, they gave up their apartment, which was, maybe $70 a month or $50, and moved into our house. So My mother and Rose did the cleaning and the cooking and the shopping, whatever had to be done. And Cena was born in 1930. And she had a baby. So, but we were all together, very happy. And that's when he talked me into her getting me a. And the reason we were able to keep the house to pay the mortgage was when I worked in New York. I worked a couple of places and I didn't like it. And we had an old friend who was the accountant, Harry Friedman. No, he wasn't a CPA or anything, but it was accountant. He taught, well, Rose learned bookkeeping in Heffley. Is it still running? I shouldn't really put this on tape. They'll put me in jail.
I think the statute of limitations have run out.
I wasn't very happy where I was, and so he said, I have a good job for you, and it was. It was for a distillery in Massachusetts, Everett, Mass. You know where Everett is? Outside of Boston. But the New York office was in a lovely building, I think 25 West 43rd Street, near Stearns. We had a Stearns there. They're not in business anymore. And he got me that job. My boss was a Catholic, Frank Powers, and I had an office, and there were other adjoining offices. I mean, you could walk from one to the other, but ours was a separate office. And I was doing typing and stenography and the telephone, just what, at $12 a week. There. That's what they paid. Well, your fare was a nickel, you know.
That was pretty good money, right?
And I worked there for about a month to 6 weeks when they gave me a raise to 16. And that was a big increase. I think I started there like in the fall. And by the time Christmas came, I learned, I became friendly with a bookkeeper that was in the next 2 rooms. And we used to go out to eat together, and we got friendly. Neither of us were engaged or anything. And I found out there was a Jewish boss who had a business, Italian delicacies in Brooklyn, retail and wholesale. The accountant's brother ran that. The Jewish guy, Halpern, was a bachelor that's how I got to horseback riding. He owned a horse and he loved, and he stabled it on Ocean Parkway. And he had a beautiful car. And if he was ready, you know, they were in different offices. I don't know what they're doing. The Jewish one, and there was 2 Italians and 1 American. Well, he was Jewish too, and my guy was Catholic. I got to know all these men, and I don't know what they're doing. Christmas came, boy, and I started to get, Gotham hose was like $3.75 a pair. You know, they didn't have nylon then. And I got like a dozen boxes and $50 bills and $100 bills. And because I did a little something for them, you know, or typing or whatever it was, if she did the bookkeeping. And, well, I found out Max Halpert had this Italian grocer. Frank La Rosa, was father's, was La Rosa Spaghetti. I think you still see it, but I don't know what happened to him. That was his father. Then Sam Perry, another Italian, was in a different business, and Londoner the other American had a mineral lava, like a mud pack that you put on a cosmetic factory, that you put on your face, you know, for mud packs. Now they all use distilled alcohol. This is during Prohibition. And they all have allotments for so much a month. So what they were doing, if there were a lot of 10 barrels a month, they would use one and dispose of the others to the bootleggers. And that's what they were doing. And I found that out. And they used to like it. And you know, I used to make out bills of lading when something was coming in. And I could remember the serial numbers. So, and they didn't like anything written down. So they would call me and ask me, you know, what came in that day. And I would give them the serial number so they can give it to a truckman. And they had, it was all covered, you know, they had garages, you know, where they used to take the load off and put it in the garages. And then they had a truckman who would
Okay.
And you're sure everybody was paid off?
well, because they never got caught. They were cautious. Now, Mineral Lava, maybe they were assigned 12 barrels a month, so they used 2 to manufacture, and the rest they disposed of. And so every time a holiday came, I was very well compensated, and I opened an account in New York, and a savings account, and I used to run to the bank all the time. And that money paid off our mortgage on Bedford Avenue. That's right.
So that JL Plumbing could stay in business and stuff.
No, that was Republic.
Yeah,
Then Prohibition was over, and Mr. Frank Powers, had 7 kids. And he had nothing to do, really. Very little. You know, whatever the Everett knew, I didn't know. He didn't, you know. And, but I used to remember numbers. So they liked that. So they used to give me nice money. Not him. From the payroll, I just got so much.
Yeah.
But the others used to come in with a $50 bill, a $100 bill. I never saw a $100 bill. And then when it was over, the party was over. So Max Halbert had the Italian store, but he always wanted to manufacture. And he decided to go into the business manufacturing hampers, metal hampers. So I got Aaron a job there, because he was good, you know, and he was honest, and he advised him against certain things. He pleaded with them, and he didn't listen, and it didn't go. But for a few years, he had a very good job there. My boss took an office, just a separate office, in another building. First building was 150 Nassau Street. Never forget that. In another building, but there was nothing to do. There was no business. Mineral Lava was...
It's a limited market.
La Rosa bought a mink farm. Sam Perry did something else. I don't know what. They all went into other businesses. They had money. And for a couple of years, I got there in a very good job there. And this Halpin used to take me home 4 o'clock, he'd say, can you leave? Are you finished? I'd say, yeah. And my mother was afraid. He was in the 40s, and I was 17 when I started to work. So maybe I was 20 or 19, And, but he was very nice. And he got me into horseback riding. I loved it. I used to go on Ocean Parkway, and then as I got older, a whole group of us used to go out to Hempstead Park. And, but he made a mistake with that hamper business, and Aaron kept telling him, as he kept putting money in, it wasn't working out. He couldn't manufacture, for the price that it sold. He couldn't compete. So he had to go back to the Italian grocer business. That his brother-in-law was running.
So what did my dad do?
But from there, one of them, I don't know which one, had reels for movie picture things that they used to make. And he worked for that for a while. But that didn't go. And how did he get in the heater business? He started in, I think, at one outing, that the plumbing supply houses had. One outing, they were in a crap game, and I think either Jack or Aaron won a little car from this guy in the heat business. A car. And I think that's what started him in the heater business.
You didn't know that either, did you?
No.
Started with he won either Jack won it and gave it to Aaron because he needed it, or Aaron won it. They must have both been playing.
But how did the car get him in the heater business?
They won the guy that they won it from was in the heater business, and how they got information or what from it. And Aaron was interested, and he had a knack for doing that, and he did. Look, Cam put 3 boys in, and they became a very rich family because they had no competition. It was only him and Cam in the local area that could deliver, when you needed something in a hurry. And Milton used to work for him, even though he was crippled. Everybody liked Milton. And
It's my dad's brother.
yeah, and he could get delivery right over if they needed a half a dozen heaters, or something. And if anything went wrong, they would be there to fix it, And he built up a wonderful business and a wonderful friendship with Henry Gassner, all the big Salter and Weinstein, New York Plumbers, all the big jobbers he did it for. No, the only mistake he made is he didn't want to sign with the labor, with the union. He was so stubborn. We pleaded with him. What do you care? The help was the same, the pay was the same, the help, liked it the way it was, but you couldn't. Look, we did too. I felt like killing those delegates, but our people wouldn't even picket us. They went to other places.
So
And the
your
ones
dad
that were
never
picketing
worked-
us,
So Aaron always worked for the heating company then?
Yeah, he didn't work for
He didn't?
for JL.
no.
But JL became a customer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
From there, it was my brother-in-law, he built up a beautiful business. Look, his brother George worked for him, Bob worked for him, and I used to yell even when business wasn't good. You know, you're paying an awful lot of money for George just to write out a ticket. That's all he did.
I worked with him one summer. And
Used to
George would
write
do
out a
nothing but just
ticket.
talk to everybody.
Who's talking? He says, you would do the same thing, you know, which I would.
And Beatty, too.
Beatty
So most of his brothers and sisters,
are gone.
but he was working, they were working for
They were
him.
working.
Oh, sure.
for him. Willie
Bob
dead.
was a salesman. He needed a salesman out there like you need a hole in the head. But Bob was sick then, and Bob wasn't doing well, so he was working for Aaron.
Yeah.
Milton, to go into business, he needed a couple of $100. Aaron's father wouldn't give it to him unless he took Milton in, the brother. And that's how he got a few $100. You know, in those days, a few $100. Not unless Milton would work for him. So he took him in. But Milton was an asset. Milton was very personable, and people, they pitied him, you know, because he used to drive around as a cripple.
How was he crippled? Was he
Well, I remember
Well,
he
that
used
whole
to limp.
family had a defect in the hip, in the leg, and they said it was polio. And as a youngster, he was in a wheelchair, and he had braces. When he was in a wheelchair in the summer, Marty went to camp, and there wasn't enough money, but Marty was sick then, or 9 years old. He had an accident. And so Milton and I used to sit on the bench and play cards. Milton Schiff
Yeah.
and me, we used to play cards together.
I spoke to Paul Shad.
Yeah.
I called him
She's not living, is
Yes.
she? She is?
in
Where?
Minneapolis. They're both in Minneapolis.
What's in Minneapolis? He's working there?
He was working for IBM or something like that. He's retired now.
Who, Paul?
Paul. yeah.
Isn't that
He's not
nice?
in good health.
Oh,
And,
what about the other one?
Louis, he died a long time
Oh.
ago. His, yeah, he's in the Shaft plot. I saw him, many years ago. It was 30 years ago. And,
I must have forgotten.
but Beatty is, she has her own apartment and stuff, and she's in Minneapolis.
With the other son.
Yeah. I called him.
No, there was something with the hip. Hank walked with a limp. Something was wrong with Beatty's legs. Milton's legs. Mully. Jack.
I never knew more.
Something wrong with it. There was something, genes in that family. But with Milton, they even had the polio doctor, I don't remember his name, who was here. And they even had him look at him, and there was nothing they could do. He wound up, you know, limping, but he was able to get around, you know, without the wheelchair. As a kid, he was in a wheelchair.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, sure.
Do you want to?
9,
Do you want
10.
to take a little break or anything? You guys go ahead and keep talking.
Yeah, okay. No, I remember Milt. I always liked him too.
Oh, yeah. Milton was likable.
Yeah,
He was
always-
darling.
yeah.
Yeah, no, we were very good friends. We used to play cards together because everybody else was in camp.
Yeah. I mean, who went? The other kids, you mean? You know, everybody else. I mean, your brothers and sisters. And everything?
No, Jack was working, Rose was working.
Yeah.
I was still home. Milton was home. He was too young. Marty was in camp because he had an accident. We had a summer place in Coney Island one summer when Marty was 9. And there was a picket fence.
Yeah.
And when Jack was coming home with the car, he ran out and went over the picket fence, fell, and punctured his penis or the Texas, I don't know. He was brought back from the dead.
Is that right?
He was in Long Island College for many, many weeks. And he had a wonderful doctor. that he had to go to the rest of his life. When he was growing, he had to go at the beginning when he was out of the hospital, like every 4 weeks, then every 2 months, then every 3 months. But he went right until always.
All right.
Of course, this doctor wasn't living anymore, but he
Yeah.
went to his assistant who knew the whole history.
Yeah. And is that part of why they thought he couldn't have children or something?
No,
No, that was entirely
no,
different.
no, that was no, I don't know why. I never found out
Hmm.
whether it was he or Beulah. I don't know. But
Yeah.
but after they adopted Susan, 4 years later, she became
Right.
pregnant.
Exactly. Usually it's 4 days later. So.
Yeah, no, it was 4 years later.
Huh.
You want a little wine?
No, no,
I'm
thanks.
just gonna get my Pepsi.
No, I'm fine.
What do you want, hon?
I'm just gonna take my Pepsi.
So,
What
during
do
the
you want?
Depression, things were real tight.
Sales are very tight. Jack, Milton, and I started in a little store, just the three of us. And we had Jasper for years, because Jasper used to live in our house. My mother took him in. He had no place to sleep, and my aunt knew him. And he wanted a place to sleep. At that time, our basement wasn't finished, but he wanted to sleep there. So he used to get his room and board, he used to do the heavy work, the windows, things like that. As he must have been about 16 when he came to us. And when he got to be 18, he knew how to drive, and he was after Jack. He wanted to work for us. And Jack said, you have to get a chauffeur's license, yeah. And this is before the Depression. Of course, we had a Packard then. And so finally he kept after Jack so long that Jack tried him out, and he got his chauffeur's license. And because before that he used to drive my mother, and so she lost her chauffeur, and he went to work for Jack and worked. And then as we progressed, we had other men. The Depression, we had to fire them. We said we can't pay it. So the three of us were in the office, and alone, I waited on customers too. And Milt drove the truck, and we had to get rid of the Packard. And I'll never forget the first time I saw Jack come home in a little Ford. And in those days, it's not like it is now. He looked like a big guy in this little Ford. I cried my eyes out, to see what happened. It didn't take too many weeks when Jasper came and said, I'll work here for nothing. Let me stay in the house and I'll drive, And he stayed with us till he died. He retired a few years before. He came from Rocky Mount. And he went through some bad times because he used to drink. And Milton was afraid. You're in a truck and you're drinking, you're delivering, you can kill somebody. So Milt used to fire him and Jack used to hire him.
Is this a relative?
Jasper?
Yeah.
No, he wasn't a relative.
No, a black guy. No, he even had one of his sons. They have children with different people. And we got his son the job once. We had a nipple factory. We used to cut up pipe, the son. But the guy was a crook, and he knew when we fired the son that we were right. But he went through jail, he went through wives, he went through no wives. You know how they live. But the last 10, 15 years of his life, he married a woman that was religious, and he changed so he wouldn't touch, because at Christmas time, you know, we used to have parties and we used to get so drunk that it was bad. You know, they couldn't come home and help their wives, you know. So we decided, no party. Give them a drink. Used to have the liquor on the counter. Give them a drink and go home. Give them the day off and let them go home and help their families, you know. So we had cake or whatever it was there now. He wouldn't take a drink then, Jasper. And all these years, he was in and out of hospitals, in and out of jail. Jack used to come to visit him in jail and bring him cigarettes. And he'd say to Milt, but he changed, take him back, you know. And I said, Milt would fire him and Jack would hire him. But he did change. A woman changed him until the day he died. He was so wonderful. When we liquidated, most of our help went to other competitors. They were all wonderful people. You know, my bookkeeper, they grabbed the countermen. They're still working for the one that Milt worked for part-time, Handel. But Jasper was at the age, and look, the union proved to be good. He was able to quit and get a pension, whatever they got. And he lived for a couple of years after that. Oh, they notified me. He lived in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. He went back there.
Is that right?
Yeah, because he lost his wife here. And he went back to Rocky Mount and he died there. But, you know, we had wonderful help. Look, it's like you treat your help nicely.
Yeah.
They stick to you.
Yeah.
But it was a tough beginning, I'll tell you that.
During the Depression.
Because we had a good reputation, a good paying reputation, and we had quite a few manufacturers say, take what you need, and you'll pay me when you can. I said, I don't know when it'll be. Don't worry about it. And one was a Callahan that was a sales rep for a big oil tank. You know, we used to sell a lot of oil burner customers then, because we went away from the plumbing and we specialized in heating. So it was boilers and radiators and pipe valves and fittings. We did away with the enamel wear. That was too much trouble with breakage and all, you know. So we didn't do it with, you couldn't do that with American Standard, but with this John Wood, Callahan, who was wonderful. I think it must have been 6 months before I could start paying them. He said, don't worry. From fittings, the same thing. Well, his ex-partner couldn't get that. So he lasted, I don't think he lasted 2 years and had to take a job. But we started in, and in fact, when I hired Miriam, it was in that little office on Liberty Avenue, and then around the corner was Rubel Brothers, who was a big coal company that was near the Long Island siding. Not that they were using the freight trains there anymore, but the Long Island Railroad owned it, and we were able to rent it because we needed a bigger place. And we moved over a holiday. They bought barrels of beer and sandwiches, and all the people that worked for us helped us move over. And at that time, we were able to hire some of them back. Not all of them, but a counterman, a chauffeur, you know. And that's how we got up.
And then how long did you have the business?
Till 70.
Till 1970?
Yeah, I worked there. Well, I worked for 45 years. But I worked there, well, 40, from 30
To 70.
till 70. And we couldn't sell it. The neighborhood got bad. Well, the reason we started Jack died in 67. And we had, by this time, a big yard, you know, and a big place. It was old, but it was big. And the neighborhood started to change very badly. And one day, a man came in, didn't say who he was, and said to Milton, would you think of renting this yard if I had to make a parking place out of it? We had never thought of it, you know. By that time we had other buildings on the block, smaller buildings for storage, for space. And he didn't know. He didn't say where he was from or who he was from. He said, well, would it be worth my while? Maybe I would. And the guy says, well, if I got your plans for a parking lot, you know, could you tell me, you know, whether you could do it? Says it all depends, you know, on what it would entail. At that time, we were interested in a couple of real estate houses with Bob Levy, who was a engineer and who was running the houses, but we had an interest in it. You know, Jack and Milton and I, in apartment houses in Brooklyn. And he was managing them. And he was a young man. And Milt called him in. He said, this guy came in. Of course, he wouldn't say who he was representing, naturally. And he just said he was in real estate. And he said, sure. He said, see what they'll offer you. Well, it turned out to be AT&T. They had a little, around the corner, they had a little office there for the ones that come in with the trucks, you know, for troubleshooters, you know. And they were getting their batteries stolen and getting their tires ripped and all and all. They wanted a parking lot with a fence, with a, well, we didn't know this, but, you know, naturally. But he brought the plans, and Bob looked at it, and he said, we can do it. He gave, you know, Milton an approximate figure what it would cost, because we had to do it. So then the man came back and said it was the telephone company, would you be interested in so much a year? And it was a very nice amount. He said, yeah, with a 10-year lease, no problem with AT&T. So we went ahead and built it, and they built a parking lot with the stanchions. They even had a booth for their man to sit in there to see that their people, we didn't need it. You know, we used to park there, of course, but we didn't need it. But we had a lot of stuff that could be outside, you know, like certain pipe and things that could rust outside that didn't need all that space. You know, tanks were protected, you know, fittings were protected, valves, you know. And so we built it, and we got a 10-year lease. And then we said, gee, what are we breaking our necks here for? We got this income. We could sell the other properties. You know, we had other places, one on Junior Street, one on another street, you know, and get an income from it. So that's what we started, but we couldn't sell the property because of the neighborhood. So there was a small guy about 10 blocks away who was left the business by his father, who rented it. He even took my bookkeeper. But he was a nut. He was a young whippersnapper. Not that young. He should have known better. But he loved volume. Volume, you know. You don't worry about how you're getting paid, but do the volume. Well, anybody can do that. And so he rented it. We had a real estate company anyway, Glenn Lee, Glenmore Avenue and Liberty Avenue, Glenn Lee. So we made the parking lot, and we got the contract from AT&T, and every month we got it. I don't think they used it for 3 years. And then they moved that office away. And they couldn't come out, get out of the contract. They tried, they wrote us a letter, and we said no, and we got the checks every month.
That was nice.
Huh?
That was nice.
Well, that was the beginning of Liquidated, and he really did a terrific job, Milt, because you can't tell anybody you're liquidating. The only ones we had to tell was Wild McLean, the boilers, because we had the Brooklyn distributorship, and we did very well with that. You know, other jobbers had to buy from us when they wanted that particular boiler, and we wouldn't do any, you know. And so, but we said we didn't want it public, because you have to buy in order to keep going.
Yeah.
So they had no problem there, because they said whatever you have left they'll transfer to their Queens distributor. You know, wouldn't have to go back. So he kept right on, and we did very well. Got paid from everybody. One guy owed me money, but I still got it after we were out, because I had a mortgage on his summer house as collateral. Of course, he was a nice guy, but he was going too high, and he wasn't paying his bills. But he wound up sent me a check every week, and we got paid. And I was away on a trip with the Strausses then, in '69, towards the end. No, it was in September, because we were away for the holidays, '70. And when I came home, the place was clean as a whistle, down to the last paper bag. I said, how did you do it? You mean not to take it? You know, you have to take a loss. Everything was sold, ready to move out. And the other guy came in, and we got rent. And my bookkeeper made out the checks. So mine was the first one she made out. And when she was telling me what she was doing, she was a notary. I said, I don't like the way this guy is going. He fixed up offices there. It was an old building, and he put money in it. He fixed it up. She said, you should see Jack's office, Betty. She says, it's gorgeous. You should see your office. It's beautiful. I said, I don't want to see it. All I want to see is the check. And I said, don't sign anything for him, because he wasn't paying sales tax. He wasn't paying a lot of things, and he was getting in hot. I said, don't go down with him. He got high mighty fast. He left his wife, children. He moved out to Woodmere. You know, and he went broke. But we were lucky. Another place bought it eventually. Another competitor, big outfit,
They bought
bought it.
the whole the building then.
Well, this guy had to go down.
Yeah.
You know, he was
So you liquidated, and you eventually
Milton.
sold everything, yeah.
sold everything.
Including the building.
No, not then.
No, but afterwards.
Oh, after this. Oh, first we had to rent it to this guy who
Yeah.
fixed it up beautifully, and I knew he wasn't going to last. He was too
Yeah.
moving too fast.
So when did you move to Florida?
73. Phil died in 72.
How did Phil get
I-
in with Jack and my dad?
How? Phil used to be with Quiet May Oil Burners from Chicago. He was a sales rep. And he used to sell one of our customers, Quiet May, who sold that burner. A and Jack got to know them because they were very good customers of ours. And once we got a good customer, we used to hold on because if they were promised delivery, they got it on time. When you have men on the job, on contractors, and you're paying them, they knew that we had a reputation of being on the job when we promised them. And so we were very friendly with this owner of this sort of. And when Phil used to come into town, Jack used to meet him and Maddie, the quiet maid guy, and Phil and Jack. And they became very close friends. When Phil was in town, Jack would invite him to the house. Karen was a nice hostess, and she always had help, so she used to invite him. And Carolyn had an aunt in Chicago who she was very close with. She used to go to Chicago. She used to call Phil. He never came with his wife. It was a very bad marriage. And they got very close. When the war started, Phil had contacts in Washington. So he called Jack up, and Jack was in the draft. He wasn't 37 yet, and they were taking him till 37. Marty was let out because he had this accident years before. He was deferred. Milton was in it, but he was in the maritime service. He thought they'd leave him alone, but they didn't. And when he got married in 41, November. He was on his honeymoon here when war was declared, December 7th. And then they had Irene a year later, but it didn't stop. So he chose the Navy. But Phil came to Jack, and Jack was getting his deferments, and then right after that, they passed a law, over 37, they weren't taking them. Sorry. And he was 37 in December 7th. That was his birthday. So Phil came to him, he says he has contacts that he can get work for the war, for the defense. He needed money, and he needed apparatus. He needed machinery. So Jack said, Aaron's got machinery. How much money do you need? He says, I think we can work it out. See what you can get. So the three of them had a meeting. Aaron met Phil then, and Jack, and they decided to see what they could get. He comes with a contract for dummy shells. Is that what it was?
Yeah, practice shells.
Practice shells.
Practice handling.
Aaron says they can make it. He was the engineer. Jack put in the money, and Phil got the contracts. And they did very well. What did they call? They called Friday Christmas. Every Friday was Christmas. Phil would come in for his check, and they did very, very well. They got contracts, and Jack was deferred, and that's how they had Chef Jacobson and Levine. And they made a lot of money. And they got very close. I didn't know Phil well then, but they went for weekends, and they went, I didn't.
Tell me something about my aunts on my dad's side, Beatty and Hank. My dad used to tell me stories about Beatty. She was kind of
Married to not nice men.
Yeah. And
One was a gangster or something. I don't know.
you know much about?
No.
Did you know them at all when they were young? Were you friendly with them at all?
Friendly? Well, Hank was married and had children when I was young.
Oh, was that right?
Oh, sure. Beatty was married, but she didn't have children then. But then she had one daughter, I think,
Isabel.
Isabel. A nice
Yes, she's
child.
nice.
Yeah. But I didn't know them. No, I mean, they were much older.
Yeah, okay.
You know, when we were teenage, they were married.
Where was your father? Was he the youngest? Was he very young in
He was the second oldest boy. Were the two girls older?
They were all older. He was the second. After Milton was the youngest, then Aaron. The oldest was Gerson, George. Then was Bob. Then Mully, who was Jack. Then Aaron and Milton.
And how about the Hank and Beatty?
Hank and Beatty, I don't know where they came in between. I only know the four boys. Hank was older than, not older than George, but I think she was older than Mully.
Okay.
And Beatty must have been older than, I think she
Yeah.
was older.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But you didn't know them.
Hank is a girl.
Hank
Hank
and
was
Beatty. were both-
Harriet, yeah.
Right.
Hank and Beatty, yeah, were the two, yeah. She also had a husband who was a womanizer, Ben Rothbard.
Then
And then she married a nice guy. Yeah.
Sydney. Oh, Ben. Okay, Ben,
Rothbard was her
Rothbard.
first husband.
the first husband. So her son,
Is Rothbard,
Harold. Was it Harold?
Harold. Francine,
Yeah. Harold and Francine.
Francine and Harold, and there's a third daughter, no? She only have two children.
How many years were you married?
Who was married to Pip,
Pip.
who worked for your father?
That was Francie,
Francie?
wasn't it? No. No, not Francie.
There was another daughter.
Yeah.
Francie and Harold. I'll think of it an hour later.
Yeah. Okay. Now I remember something like that. I think I might have that tree. I was contacted by someone who was looking up the Shaft family tree for, I can't even remember the name. This would be a great aunt or so. who
Must
died.
be Gerson's wife, Ida.
Not Ida,
Her
no.
child, her daughter.
No,
She had a daughter and a son.
yeah, but no, it wasn't,
No?
this guy was separate. He wasn't part of the family.
Mm.
But he's friendly with and she was older. She would have been an aunt or something of my dad.
To be a great aunt for you.
Yeah. So it was one of the other. She was a sister of my grandfather, I guess. Or something. On my dad's side. You don't know much about the chef.
Chef Barnett.
Barnett, yeah.
His brother was Barnett.
Right,
Yeah.
we found that out.
Yeah,
So when were you married the first time?
34,
I'm 34. And how many years were you married?
25 and a half.
Oh, that long. And then to Phil, how long were you married?
Not quite 10,
Not quite 10. When did you marry him?
65. But I went with him for 2 years before. But he wouldn't stay over at my house alone. And you know how we came together?
Oh,
Marty had made a documentary about FDR. This must have been right after he died, or before, because he needed money to do it. It was really putting news together. That's what it was. But he was very excited about it, and he wanted to do it. So he wanted to know if we wanted to be part of it. I said, sure. So I think we each gave him $3,000. And at that time, Phil and Jack and Aaron were together. So that's what we did. And he produced it. And, we had a wonderful opening night with the horses, with the, and he has pictures with Eleanor and everything. And he had to get permission from Eleanor Roosevelt, who was charming. He said he was at her house for lunch and everything. And the only one that wasn't doing well was her son, what was it, Franklin Roosevelt? Who else?
Elliot.
Who?
Elliot.
He was marrying actresses, He wasn't doing well, so he had whatever portion we had without the money. And to see what happened. Well, they had an opening, and and every once in a while you'll see it on the news, or you saw it at night or something, but it didn't make millions of dollars. So after so many years, they were ready to give back whatever you put in it. You didn't make any millions, but you got back what you invested. Maybe we got back 2,000 more. I don't even remember. But they had to get the signatures of all the investors in order to curtail the legal cost. If you got the signatures, then the lawyers had an easier battle of it. So Marty said, sure, I can get it. So my family. So he sent us things, and we signed it and sent it back. Well, he was looking for, that was after the war. He was looking for Phil. Couldn't find him. Because after it was over, Phil had a chance of getting a Cadillac agency or something. Because that time cars were hard to get. Right after the war, they weren't manufacturing them. So they were looking for Phil, and the last Jack had heard about him, he was in the broker's office, and he was trading, He called the broker's office. He hasn't been here for a couple of years. Didn't know where he lived. But Jack didn't give up. He tried and tried and tried. And he finally found him in Forest Hills. So he was already separated from his wife for 7 years. He was alone. Well, he couldn't find him because first he was living with his daughter. Oh, incidentally, I got to tell you something. Living with his daughter, and then he finally got a job as a headhunter. He was doing all right, and from there, he got some contacts where he did mergers and acquisitions. Okay, go ahead. And so when he found him, he was in Forest Hills. He said he had been living with his daughter first. He was separated from his wife, and they weren't surprised. And he was on the road a lot, too. And he lived in Forest Hills, and Jack told him why Marty wanted him. He said, sure, so let him send me whatever he had. And he was glad to get the money then. And so Carolyn got on the phone, and she says, what do you mean you're alone? How about coming out here for dinner? He grabbed the opportunity, and she invited him for a Saturday, and this was in '63, a week after Mort was married. A week after, I know it's a week because that Saturday, I was going up, they had gotten an apartment near Columbia Presbyterian, because that's where he was going to medical school. And they wanted to get married fast, so they got married Labor Day, and they were on their honeymoon. And when they came back, Gail's parents and I went up there to, I can't do cleaning. I brought my man that used to do the windows and the screens and Woodmere, you know. And Babe was very good about fixing things and doing things. They needed blinds, they needed this. Wes did the work, and Sylvia and I wrote down what we needed. We went shopping. Anyway, they fixed up the apartment. It was an old house. They wanted to get married fast. That was the only thing we could get near the school. So that was on a Saturday, and I drove. You know, I used to drive from Woodmere across that road. Oh, well, you live in Connecticut now, so you wouldn't know. You know, near the George Washington Bridge there, whatever they call it. It was a good ride. And I didn't do any work, but I was there, you know. We went down for shades, we went down for this. Anyway, when I came home, Carolyn called me, and she called me in the morning, and I said, no, I'm going up to the apartment with the Strausses. We're going to see if we can clean it up a little bit. So she says, call me when you get home. So I called her when I got home, and I said, I'm tired. She says, oh, come for supper. I said, oh, no, I don't feel like eating, and I don't want to come for supper. And I feel, you know, I don't even feel like eating, and I have to, what do you have to change? You're coming to my house, you know. So, well, I feel sloppy. She says, so put on another dress or another pair of pants or something, and come over. What are you going to, it's a long evening, you know, what are you going to do all evening? So I said, well, I'll see how I feel. Well, I must have stripped, you know, and taken a drink or something, a sandwich. And then I looked at the clock, and it was still early, you know, 7 o'clock or something. I said, oh. And they lived in Atlantic Beach, which was 15 minutes away from me. I says, I'm going to get in the car and go over there for an hour. Well, I went in. I called her. I said, I'll come over for now. I come into the house, and Phil was sitting there. He had been there all day, and they knew his whole story for years that they didn't see him. I knew nothing. But I knew him. And I walked in, and I said, Phil, I see the man, but all I see is his white hair. You know, when I saw him last, he didn't have gray hair. And he greets me, and he kisses me, and he never forgot. You're the only one that didn't invite me to Morty's bar mitzvah. He was invited to all their bar mitzvahs, you know, to his and to Lenny's and to the weddings and everything, because he was close with Jack, not with me. So I sat there. I said, what are you doing here? I had no idea that he was coming. So he said, well, your sister-in-law called me and told me about Marty's letter. And I said, fine. So we sat there. Well, he wasn't going to go through the whole thing, and I didn't know what was what. I'm sitting there. Well, at 11 o'clock, my brother Jack looks at his watch. He says, look, you passed the Lawrence station. The last train, I think, was 12 o'clock or something. He says, can you drop Phil off? I said, sure. So when we left there, you know, I had coffee and cake or whatever, you know, and we talked, but general, I didn't know. He was there all day long. I come to the station, and we got time there, so I stopped the car, and I said, you know, where are you living? What are you doing? So he tells me he's been separated for so many years. First he lived with his daughter for a while, and then he got his own apartment. And I have a lot of friends in Forest Hills, so I knew the area. He said, I'm in the studio there. And it was right before Rosh Hashanah. It was September. Yeah, they were married Labor Day. And I said, well, do you go to your daughter for the holiday? No, he said, they don't observe anything. So, and I knew the first night, I guess we were going to Miriam's, but the second night was Beatty was going to make dinner the second night. So I said, do you want to come for the second night? He said, would I? I said, well, let me see if she invited anybody. And if she's going to make dinner, you know, because she was the boss. But she always loved company. So he says, well, can I call you? And he knew my office number. I said, sure. So the next day, one day I asked Dee, I said, are you going to make the second night? He says, you says, yeah. Your brother and sister-in-law are coming, Jack and Carolyn, that's all. And Milt was going someplace else and whatever. So when he called, I said, you could come the second night, you know. And he sure enough came. In the meantime, Carolyn told me all this. His wife wiped him out. Wiped him out clean. Because when he wanted to go into this agency or something, I said to Jack, are you crazy? You got a business that you're making a living out of it. Why do you need another headache? What he needs it, let him go into it. He had the money then. I said, but you don't need it, you know. So he saw I was right. I said, this business you're making a living from, the other one you don't know. So that fell through. See, so that's when he was in limbo. But he came that night and we had dinner. And Friday, that night, I don't know what it was, it must have been a Friday, they used to have Playhouse Theater, very good things on television, show, you know, plays. So we all went into the den, the four of us, and we're after dinner, and we're sitting and we're watching that Playhouse 90. And all of a sudden Jack says, it's 11:30, you gotta make the last train, you know. He says, come on, Phil, get your coat, get your hat, you know. And he, you know, like I was a little girl. So when he got home, I knew he was going to call because he wanted to talk to me and he didn't get a chance. We were watching something and the minute a commercial came, you ate, you know. You had nuts. So he said, he had me on the phone for about an hour. He said, I didn't wake you. I said, no. So he had me on the phone. He says, if I call you at the office, he says, would you have dinner with me sometime? I said, of course I would. So that's the way it started. And nobody knew I was going out with him until the end of November. Because Carolyn, once I was alone, she was so funny. She used to say, nobody has to know where you go and who you go with. Keep your mouth shut and just go and do what you wanted. You're a big girl, you know. She was so funny. And so I didn't say anything. But then I was going to Lou Nelson's unveiling. Lou Nelson died that winter. And I was going to pick him up because we were going to, it was on Sunday. We used to go to the off-Broadway shows in New York, then have dinner, and then I'd drop him off. And then he'd call me. You know, I had to call him when I got home because, you know, I used to drop him. It was on the way home. And so we went to matinees, you know, so I wouldn't get home at night. So, what was I trying to bring up?
How you got to...
Lou Nelson
I had to ask directions how to get from Washington Cemetery to Forest Hills. I didn't know which way, how to go. So I had to ask Milton. And he said, what are you doing there? I said, I'm picking Phil up and we're going out to a show. Nobody said anything.
They were probably also happy.
No, they were all, yeah, they all liked him. Well, he was a nice guy.
And then you got married 2 years later?
Well, He proposed to me in the car. We're driving up to the Bermans to play bridge in New York. And I'm driving. He didn't drive anymore at that time, and he didn't want to start. I don't know why. And in the car, he said, "Would you marry me?" And I had to go over the George Washington Bridge. I didn't turn when I was. I said, "This is a hell of a way to propose." I said, "You have some nerve." I was supposed to get off at that exit, and I didn't get off, and we had to go over the whole bridge, and we were late to the Bermans. So I said, I can get married. I said, "But you can't. You're not divorced." He said, "If you say you'll marry me, I'll get a divorce." So we were only an hour late to the Bermans. They were getting worried. So I said, "Because how do you get a proposal in the middle of New York, cross country?"
You got to think about what you're doing, yeah.
So we came up there, and they had a drink. They loved him, and they loved to play bridge with us. You know, Phil was a good bridge player. That's when I started again. I used to play, and then I stopped. But then when he played bridge, but he played gin with my gang, because the girls played canasta, and they all liked him so much that he played gin. He didn't care for it, but he liked their company, and they liked him. So that was, but it took him. He didn't take a thing away from his wife. Just what he was giving her. Alimony, insurance, health policy, everything. And she wouldn't give it to him. She kept saying, "Why all of a sudden do you want a divorce? What do you need a divorce for?" He said, "Because up until now, I never went out." He said, "Now I find I'm neither fish nor fowl." And he said, "That's what I want." And they had the same lawyer who was a friend of theirs who tried very hard for him. And it took 2 years. But he was invited to all the family functions. The only thing, Carolyn wouldn't let him get into a family picture. She says, "You're not in the family." She was so funny.
Yeah,
She was funny. We go on the honeymoon, and they take us to the airport, Jack and Carolyn. And he was carrying, we were going to Hawaii, so we had to go to San Francisco first. He was carrying a top coat with him. It was May. And he had the Sunday paper. Or he was going to get the Sunday, I don't know. And I said something. "Well, let me hold this." She gives me a slap on the hand. She said, "You'll never learn." She says, "Let somebody do something for you." She says, "He's a man, let him carry it." Oh, she was so funny.
Yeah.
She was funny.
You said you had something you wanted to say about Joan or something?
Joan and Al called. They're coming in Thursday. They want to see me over the weekend.
Oh, everybody wants to see you this
Everything the
weekend.
same weekend. I said, "Gee whiz." But I'll try to make it Friday for lunch. I'm sure my guests will want to go to Aventura, and they want to see the new Burdines there that they put up. It's a beautiful store. I already went last week. So, but I said I'll try to. They're going to call me. And I said I'll try to get lunch in Friday. But isn't that, and they're leaving Monday.
Yeah, so that's the only chance.
That's the only chance they have. She was not well, Sue. She had walking pneumonia.
Oh, their daughter.
Yeah.
Their daughter.
But she was going to come down then, but she didn't have to. I'm sure she had good care.
Say hello.
I will.
You have any more questions?
Oh God, I don't know. If I think up any, maybe. If I think up any more questions, I'll
Call
bring it
me.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.